You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Des Moines, Sandhagen versus Figueiredo, the main event in the bantamweight division between the former bantamweight title contender, practically still a title contender, and a former title challenger in Corey Sandhagen, taking on the former flyweight champion, now bantamweight contender, coming off the loss to Petr Yan in Davison de Guerra Figueiredo. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. Alright guys, first fight up we're going to break down is in the bantamweight division. It's going to be a battle between Gaston, the Dream Killer Bolanos, taking on Quang Bang Lee. 8-2 for Lee, 8-4 for the Dream Killer Gaston Bolanos. I believe he's 8-3. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like that record might be off. Sometimes on the UFC website, the records are a little bit off. But looking at this fight, man, I think we have a battle of primarily strikers. I think that if Quang Lee is smart, he will look to take Bolanos down. He will look to implement some sort of wrestling because we know that Bolanos has okay defense, but he does give up his back. He will, allow you to look for submissions. He will allow you to get top time, and maybe you could land some ground and pound if you are as powerful as Lee. But, I mean, for the most part, I think this fight probably plays out on the feet for 85-90% of it, and I just don't see Quang Lee being at the level of a Gaston Bolanos. Now, we did see Bolanos get knocked out by Marcus McGee. Nobody was expecting a KO from McGee there, and he was able to put it on him, put him out. But it looks like Marcus McGee's going to be fighting Petr Yan next based off the rumors that have been swirling around. So I don't think a loss to Marcus McGee is a bad look for Bolanos. Bolanos comes in as a 2-1 underdog against Cortavius Romeus, gets put in some precarious positions, but comes out on top, lands vicious 12-6 elbows as he's trying to sneak up and get his head and his torso higher than Romeus so that he can get up and look to get to the feet. Almost has him TKO'd at the end of the second. I feel like if Bolanos pushed a little bit harder, he probably would have got that late TKO. But Romeus isn't the best win. I mean, lost the first time on the Contender Series to Ramon Tavares. Comes back in on the Contender, gets a lackluster win via decision. Then he gets into the UFC and, I mean, didn't win any fights in the UFC. Now he's cut. So I don't necessarily think the wins on the side of Bolanos are great in the UFC either. I mean, he beat Aaron Phillips, who, never really had a ton of success inside the UFC either. When I look at this fight, man, I think Quang Lee has the power to hurt Bolanos. I think he has the power to knock him out with the boxing side of the striking game. Good 1-2, solid left hook. A lot of power in his shots, and if they just stand and bang and Bolanos gets himself into precarious positions, he could get clipped and could get knocked out. But I do think that the higher level striker is Bolanos. I think he switches his stances, uses a lot of fakes and feints, chops low kicks, chops body kicks, comes back with good counters. He's got spinning back elbow knockouts that are pretty nice. So, I mean, in this fight, I just think it's going to be primarily a striking match. If Quang Lee uses his wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I think he has a much easier time in securing rounds and maybe even getting a ground and pound finish. But I think for the most part, this fight is going to play out on the feet. And Quang Lee just got knocked out by a primary grappler in Long Zhao. And if you're getting knocked out by Long Zhao, I think Bolanos is going to do some bad things to you. So I'm going to take Gaston Bolanos. I think the numbers should be a lot higher, but I understand why he's not the biggest favorite because, he has been KO'd before and some things along those lines. And Lee does have a lot of power, but, I mean, he didn't really have anything to offer Chris Gutierrez, and I don't see him really using a primary wrestling game plan in this fight. That's the smart thing to do. I just don't think he's going to do it. So I'm going to go with Gaston Bolanos to actually find a late second round TKO here against Quang Bang Lee. I just think he's going to start picking it up, start using the fakes and feints. It's going to leave Quang Lee more open, and he's going to come back with some good counters. I think he cracks him in round 2, puts him down, and finishes him. So give me Gaston, the Dream Killer Bolanos, to win this fight via second round TKO in the first fight up of the evening. All right, next fight up is in the women's strawweight division. You have a battle between Marina Rodriguez, taking on Jillian Robertson. Striker versus grappler. And, you know, Marina Rodriguez has always had issues with heavy grapplers. If you stand and strike with Rodriguez, Marina would be a minus 2,000 favorite. If it was a grappling match and Rodriguez was grappling with Robertson, Jillian Robertson would be a minus 2,000 favorite. I think this fight comes down to who can impose their game plan. You hear it all the time. I've heard it said multiple times before. The higher level competition is way, way, way on the side of Marina Rodriguez. She has fought the much, much, much better competition than a Jillian Robertson. I do believe that her takedown defense has gotten a little better, but to be honest, I mean, if you're able to take her down, she's not really able to get back up to the feet. I mean, the only person who had some grappling success and then wasn't able to get the job done was technically Michelle Waterson, but she's not even really a grappler. She's a striker, but she can use her grappling, and she took down Marina a lot. She held her down, and in this fight, I think Jillian Robertson can do the same thing. I don't think she has much to offer on the feet. I think whether it's in boxing or kickboxing range, Marina Rodriguez wins that fight more time than she doesn't. She's going to be pumping the jab, finishing the high combinations with the low kicks, mixing up the levels, good front kicks, good knees. I think she's going to be working a lot in breaking off the clinch with strikes and maybe trying to get Jillian Robertson into that clinch. But that's a hard thing and a dangerous thing to do in this fight, because if you're throwing elbows and knees and uppercuts in the clinch, all she needs to do is catch one of those knees and drive forward, and you're on your back now. And Marina doesn't have the best get-ups. She doesn't go for submissions off of her back. Even if she does go for submissions off of her back, she'll probably get reversed, and it'll leave Jillian Robertson in the top position to potentially get off a ground and pound TKO or look to set up a submission. Now, she did just take on Yasmin Lucindo. Got taken down, got controlled, but she didn't get submitted. She was able to stay defensively responsible, but she wasn't really trying to get back up, and every time she did try, she just got shut back down. Now, I believe Yasmin Lucindo to be a better mixed martial artist than Marina Rodriguez, but I think Jillian Robertson is a better grappler, overall pure grappler, than Marina Rodriguez, and I think that's than Yasmin Lucindo, and in the case of the fight with Marina Rodriguez, I think she's going to be able to use her grappling, man. Now, do I think she should be a huge favorite? No, I don't think Jillian Robertson should be a huge favorite in any fight, because she's always going to be vulnerable to get caught and clipped up on the feet. And against a dangerous Muay Thai practitioner like Marina Rodriguez, who will throw multiple shot combinations, who will mix it up between the high to the low to the mid levels with punches and kicks, there's always that chance that Marina gets taken down, but she gets back up. She tires out Jillian Robertson and gets an attritional TKO in the second or the third round. There's always that chance because Marina is much, much better on the feet. But I don't think she's going to really have the opportunity to get that off here. And I think you could see a finish from Jillian Robertson, or you could see a decision win. We haven't seen Marina Rodriguez get subbed in the UFC. I don't think Jillian Robertson is going to do that either, but I could see a late ground and pound TKO where she's trying to get the subs, but when she doesn't, she just goes back to the strikes. She's walking up a rear naked choke, nope, elbow, elbow, elbow. And with the 12-6 elbows, I think that makes a huge difference here. And I'm going to take Jillian Robertson. I'm not the biggest fan of her. I've never been the biggest fan of her. I've never thought she was that good. But her grappling is top level, and it's much better than Marina, and I think she's going to be able to get off her game plan. So I'm going to take Jillian Robertson to win. I'm going to take her by a third round ground and pound TKO. Easily could go to decision because Robertson doesn't really push to get that finish a lot of the times, but I do think she knows where she has the advantages here. If I'm Marina, I'm pumping the jab, I'm faking low kicks, I'm throwing knees and uppercuts up the middle. The knees, uppercuts, and front kicks are going to be the best weapons for Marina against a girl like Robertson, and striking off the break, cutting the angles with the elbows, knees to the body, and just trying to beat her up and make it nasty. Get in that dirty boxing range and beat her up. But I don't think she's going to be able to do that because we've seen this song and dance with Marina Rodriguez time and time again. I'm rooting for Rodriguez, but I'm not picking her. Give me Jillian Robertson, third round TKO over Marina Rodriguez. All right, next fight up is in the middleweight division. A very, very interesting fight here between Ryan Loder taking on Azamat Bekoev. You have Iron Azamat taking on a man of steel, Ryan Loder. This is a very interesting matchup, guys. Extremely interesting. I didn't know much about Ryan Loder until The Ultimate Fighter. And I didn't know much about Bekoev until he pounded Zach Reese's head into the mat. Let me tell you two things. Number one, we still don't know much about Ryan Loder, but he dominated Robert Valentin, which is something that Torres Finney couldn't do at all. And people were much, much higher on Torres Finney than they were on Ryan Loder. Azamat Bekoev went to a split decision with Dylan Budka, the Mindless Hulk. I know he knocked out Zach Reese. He is going to be the better striker here, but you got to really take a deep dive into this Bekoev guy to understand that I think Ryan Loder is much more live here than a plus 350 price tag. This guy's grappling is legit. Now, I think Bekoev has good takedown defense. I do think Bekoev is the better striker. He has a good check hook, a good right hand. He moves well on the outside, but he leaves himself open for strikes. And he will get into those grappling scrambles and exchanges. And I don't think that's something you want to do against a grappler like Ryan Loder. Loder reminds me of a Reiner de Ritter. I don't think he's at that level, but he has a similar style. But he's much meaner with his ground and pound. That's why I like this kid. I think Bekoev could knock out Ryan Loder on the feet. I think he could catch him stepping in with a big elbow and potentially grab up his neck if he hurts him bad enough with the shot on his way in. Bekoev's going to be live for a KO. Bekoev's going to be live to rock Ryan Loder and grab his neck in a sub on the defense of the takedown. I believe that is to be true. But I think Ryan Loder's grappling is legit. And he's one of those grapplers who will use the grappling positionally to beat the shit out of you with ground and pound. Just go back and look at his Ultimate Fighter finale win. He got into that crucifix after, he got flattened out. He almost got rear naked choked by Robert Valentin. And it looked like it was going to be over. Somehow Valentin doesn't get the sub. Ryan Loder keeps scrambling, keeps pushing forward, gets on top, gets to the crucifix, and just butchers Robert Valentin. I like this guy. Because even if he gets put in bad positions, he's not going to quit. And he did lose a fight in A1 Combat. It was closer than people believed. I believe people thought Ryan Loder did enough to win. The decision was given to the other guy. He did get dropped in that fight. I believe it was with a left hook to a right hand. He got dropped, but he was able to recover. I do think Bekoev is live for a knockout. He's live for, like I said, a drop and a potential submission. But I think Ryan Loder, his grappling is a little bit too high level for Bekoev. And I think people are going to overblow Bekoev because he came in round one knockout in his UFC debut. But it was against Zach Reese, who is not very good. I'm sorry, he's just not. Now, we don't know how good Ryan Loder is, but I know his grappling, his jiu-jitsu, his positional awareness, his ability to get to that crucifix position, to set up submissions is elite. If he gets put in a bad position when he's on the bottom, he'll try to work his way back up. And I like that. And that's all you really have to tell me when I'm seeing that he's a huge underdog. And I think he is going to have the better gas tank in this fight against Bekoev. I think he's going to be able to scramble harder than Bekoev. And I think he's going to be able to get his game off more than Bekoev as long as he doesn't get KO'd. So give me Ryan Loder. I'm going to take the plus 350 underdog. I think he will probably get hurt early. But I think he's going to use that to scramble, hide the head, get in on the single leg, and eventually just wear out Bekoev. And I think he's going to finish him with ground and pound in the second round. I think it could be a sub. Maybe he locks up an Americana. Maybe he finds a way to take his back and get the submission. I think this Ryan Loder dude is very, very, very tricky on the ground. And I think people are heavily underestimating him in this matchup when I don't think you should. And maybe I'm saying that more confidently because I saw him go to a split decision with Dylan Budka, who has had no success in the UFC. But I think that means something here. And I think Loder can get off his game. So give me Ryan Loder, second round ground and pound TKO over Azamat Bekoev as the plus 350 underdog. All right, up next, you got a lightweight battle, a banger between the hometown hero, the returning Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens, taking on Mason Jones, who's also returning to the UFC after a few wins over in Cage Warriors. This fight's going to be a barn burner. And I know people are going to come into this fight and they're expecting Mason Jones to wrestle. They're expecting him to use his grappling. They're expecting him to get in on the hips, take down Jeremy Stephens. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not happening. That's not happening, man. This is going to be a striking matchup. This is primarily going to be on the feet. Maybe Jones gets takedowns at the end of rounds, the end of round 2, the end of round 3, trying to seal it up. But I believe this to be a kickboxing match for as long as it lasts. And that's what Jeremy Stephens wants. Is Stephens the most successful fighter in the UFC? No, he's not. But he's fought some killers, man. I mean, Rafael Dos Anjos, Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo. I mean, you name it, he's fought him. Kelvin Cater. I mean, I can't even come up off the top of my head how many guys that this guy has fought. Mateusz Gamrot. The list goes on and on and on. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's got a knockout victory over Josh Emmett, a knockout victory over Rafael Dos Anjos early on in his career. No contest with Yair Rodriguez, that was kind of whatever. That first fight was weird, but then Yair came back and ended up getting the win via TKO. In this fight, man, I think he won by decision. I think it was looking like a TKO, but Jeremy recovered. Jeremy got on top and made it a little bit closer, but I think Yair ended up winning that by decision. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm a little off. Mason Jones had a win over... didn't have a win, but he fought Ludovic Klein back and forth, but pretty much, got dominated, got dropped. We didn't know Ludovic Klein at the time. Klein was actually a plus 300 underdog going into that fight, and he showed why he shouldn't have been that big of an underdog. He goes in, he beats David Onama via decision, and, at the time that didn't really mean anything. Now look at what Onama's doing, just coming off a win over Giga Chikadze. He's getting much, much better in his career. So I think that's a good win. He goes back and forth, tooth and nail, to the brink with Mike Davis, one of the best pure striking matches in the UFC back during the COVID-19 era. I mean, go back and watch that fight. If you haven't watched Mike Davis versus Mason Jones, go out of your way to check that out. And here's what I think, man. I think Mason Jones is not good defensively. I think he leaves himself open, and I think if you leave yourself open against a guy in Jeremy Stephens, who is clearly coming into this fight looking for a highlight reel KO, coming into this fight to make a statement in his hometown of Iowa, the UFC return, he's going to knock you out. So I believe Jeremy Stephens 100% is live for a KO here against Mason Jones. I also think if Jones pushes Jeremy Stephens back, if he gets in his face, if he lands that beautiful check hook, if he lands that 1-2, if he starts getting inside, left uppercut or right uppercut, left hook, jab, overhand right, jab to the body, jab up top, ripping shots, I think he could get an attritional TKO against Jeremy Stephens. He might be able to push a pace that Stephens just isn't able to keep up with at this point in his career. And that's why I think if you're looking to play the fight from a betting perspective, I believe you should play fight ends by KO, because I think this fight will end by knockout, whether it's Jones getting the attritional finish and hurting Stephens, or it's Stephens landing a bomb and knocking out Mason Jones. I think this fight ends by knockout. Now, when it comes to who I'm going to pick, I think Jeremy Stephens can win this fight. I think he can land the knockout. I think he can land a big hook, a big uppercut. I think he could land a big head kick. I think Stephens is live, especially in his hometown UFC return. But I also think Mason Jones is coming into this fight to make a statement as to why he should have never left the UFC, why he is as good as people believed him to be back then. I don't know who I want to pick, man, because I think Stephens is a lot more live than a plus 400. But going off the odds, if I didn't know what the odds were, I still would think Jeremy Stephens is live to win this fight against the style of a Mason Jones. This fight's really a coin flip for me. I think attritional finish, volume, output is on the side of Jones. I think Jones maybe gets takedowns at the end of rounds. I think Stephens is going to have the power. He's going to have the ability to get the knockout. I think he is going to draw Mason Jones into that brawl, which can leave him there on the center line to get clipped up and get KO'd. Give me Mason Jones. I'm going to take Mason Jones by knockout. Would I bet him as a huge favorite? No. Like I said, I like the fight ends by KO, but I'm going to say Mason Jones gets into that brawl with Jeremy Stephens, and I think in the second round, He hurts him with something. Stevens backs up, throws big bombs. Jones ducks out of the way, pulls back, comes back with counters. I think he goes up top and starts ripping shots to the body, uppercut, shot to the body against the fence, and just drops little heathen Jeremy Stevens. So give me Mason Jones, second round TKO up against the cage. I think he gets it done. I just can't pick Stevens at this point. I think this is a favorable matchup for his style, but I'm going to take Mason Jones by second round TKO. I think he's going to get it done, and I think he'll get Stevens out of there. All right, next fight up is in the bantamweight division. You got a battle between Cameron Smotherman taking on Sidey. This is going to be another close fight, guys. I think this mainly plays out in the kickboxing range. I think if Smotherman really wants to, he probably could go for takedowns and use his wrestling. But I think this is going to be mainly a kickboxing fight. Just like Jones and Stevens, I think we're going to see a very similar situation here, where it's a mainly boxing, kickboxing match. It's going to be fought in that clinch range, boxing range, and mid-range for the most part. I'm a fan of Sidey. You know, I picked him against Garrett Armfield. We squeaked away with the decision, but going back on a rewatch, I understand why Sidey won that fight. Those very, very close submission attempts, the almost complete submission in the first round, hurting Garrett Armfield in the second round, constantly threatening with submissions. He was the fighter who was more in the driving seat of finishing the fight, and I think that's really what it came down to. So I don't think it was a robbery, and I do think Sidey won a close fight, but he won because of the fact he was going for those finishes. Now, he gave up a lot of takedowns in the threat and the hunt of the submission. And in this fight, man, I think you look at Cameron Smotherman, comes in on the UFC Contender Series or the Dana White Contender Series, gets knocked out by Charlampos Gregorio. That was a fight where a lot of people were big on Smotherman. Smotherman comes in, gets knocked out. Gregorio doesn't really do much of anything inside the UFC. He comes in against Jake Hadley a little while after that Contender Series performance, a few years later, comes in on short notice and beats Jake Hadley, and beats him quite handily. Really solid distance control, good range management, solid 1-2s, good check hooks. He's very good and has a very good understanding of that outside angle and the outside foot positioning. That's the one thing I noticed about a guy like Smotherman. He's got a good understanding of where he needs to be in order to land shots and be out of the range of potential counters. I just think in this fight, he's going to get put out by Sidey. There you go, guys. I said it. I think Sidey is too crisp. I think he's too clean. I think he's going to use that 3-inch reach advantage to his, advantage for the most part in this fight. I don't really see him getting into that phone booth brawl against Smotherman. I think Smotherman will land some good shots. I think he'll land his jab. I think he'll land his 1-2. I think he'll land that left hook. But you got to understand, I still believe Cam Smotherman to be a little bit chinny. And I think people are going to look at that performance against Hadley and just give him all pats on the back and not look at it for what it really was. And the fact that he did get rocked towards the end of that fight by Hadley, who couldn't bust a grape in terms of his UFC career just based off what we've seen. It's not disrespecting him, even though it is coming off disrespectful. But, he's not a guy who KOs people. He doesn't rock people. He doesn't hurt people. And Hadley rocked Smotherman. You couldn't really see it too much, but he got stopped there for a second and wobbled. I think Sidey is a way cleaner boxer than Smotherman. I think he has way better understanding of the range and distance control. I think if Smotherman wants to make this fight a lot easier, he should shoot takedowns, but you have to be careful because Sidey will throw up those guillotine chokes. And if he rocks Smotherman and he jumps in for a takedown, I wouldn't be surprised if Sidey grabbed his neck and choked him out. Those chokes against Garrett Armfield, like Armfield was very aware, he was able to pass, he was able to get off to side control, control the legs and not allow for Sidey to use that lower half when he was hunting those chokes. But those were close. And if Smotherman doesn't control those legs and you see them wrap around the sides and the back of Smotherman, he could get choked out 100%. Sidey by sub is definitely live in this one. I like Sidey's boxing. I like his jab. I think he's got one of the cleanest jabs in the UFC. Well, I won't say that, but I think he has one of the cleaner jabs in the UFC. I think he will use that jab a lot against Smotherman. I think he's going to use that range, those front kicks up the middle, the jab, the 1-2, and I think he's going to eventually knock out Cam Smotherman. Now, Smotherman's good on the inside. Like I said, good understanding of angles and positioning and where he needs to be to land his shots. Good uppercuts to the body, left hooks, right hands, jabs down the center, the cross, getting that outside foot. He's all very good at it, but I think Sidey's better, and I think Sidey is crisper, he's cleaner, and he's got a longer range and reach to use in this fight, and I don't really see Smotherman using takedowns, even though that would be the smart thing to do, because Sidey is not the best off of his back. But I'm going to say it's primarily a striking matchup, and I think Siri Sidey wins a striking matchup. I do. I'm going to take Siri Sidey by a second-round TKO here. I think he will clip the chin of Smotherman on the way in. I think he will hurt him, and I think when he hurts him, he's either going to put him down and finish him with ground and pound, or he's going to rock him and then start ripping to the body and really start digging in with those shots. So the pick is Siri Sidey. I'm going to take him by late second-round TKO over Cameron Smotherman, and let's move on to the next one. All right, now we're on to the next fight in the bantamweight division. You've got Montel Quick Jackson taking on Daniel Marcos. I'm going to be honest, guys. I actually really like Daniel Marcos in this fight. I know people are going to look at the Davy Grant fight and say he lost the Davy Grant fight. And don't get me wrong, that fight was close. It probably should have gone to Davy Grant. And I was on the Marcos side, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you anything differently, okay? We'll talk about the John Castaneda fight. Clear Daniel Marcos win. 3-0, but gets clipped with a head kick at the end of the third round. Wobbles, but is able to survive, move around, and recover. And, you know, is it the most exciting style for Marcos? No. Now you look at the side of Montel Jackson, coming off that first-round KO over Damon Blackshear. You look at Blackshear's last fight, he looks amazing. Doesn't finish Alatong Haley, but is outstriking him for 15 minutes, doesn't resort to the grappling. I think Montel Jackson is good. I like the southpaw stance for him. I like the circling to the outside. He's very heavy in his stance. He's not a stand straight up, move around, light on the feet, bouncing in and out. He's very grounded, which means he can generate a lot of power, but it's a little bit harder for him to get out of the way. I think Marcos is probably a little bit more loose and fleet-footed, but at the same time, he doesn't generate as much power as a guy like Montel Jackson. I think what Montel is going to try to do is to draw him out with a couple feints, allow for Marcos to come in, and then counter right down the middle. He's got a very solid 1-2, but if you really look at Montel Jackson, his footwork, his angles, his understanding of where he needs to be in order to land his shots is very good. But when he actually executes the punches, when he actually executes the shots, I don't like the technique when he's on the trajectory to landing his punches. I feel like he kind of wings big punches, throws big shots. He's got a good jab and a solid straight. And like I said, that's probably his best combination is his 1-2. Demonstrated perfectly by the Damon Blackshear win. That was a fight that was like plus 290 to go under 2.5 rounds or something crazy like that, and it finished in under a minute. I think, like I said, the biggest difference is Montel Jackson's power versus the fight IQ and counter ability of Daniel Marcos, the decision making. Changing stances from orthodox to southpaw, attacking the inside and outside leg, throwing kicks and punches to the body, circling, moving laterally. I think the biggest thing that Montel's going to look to do is land big shots, big punches down the middle that can hurt Marcos or cut him, and then look to push Marcos up against the cage and hold him there. People are going to come in and say, oh, you know, Montel Jackson is this amazing fighter and this and that and everything in between. But when you really look at it, I don't think any of his wins are primarily impressive besides the Damon Blackshear win. I would rate the Blackshear win very high, but aside from that, I think the fighter he's fought that's closest to the style of Daniel Marcos would be a fighter like Julio Arce. And that Arce fight was close. I mean, Arce got hurt at a certain point with a jab, which shows how much power that Montel Jackson has. But I think Arce's easier to hit, but he might be a little bit more dangerous in terms of fight finishing ability. And I think Montel Jackson would probably look to use his wrestling in this fight. But if it stays a primary striking matchup, I honestly favor Daniel Marcos to just kind of outpoint him and by the bare minimum, just get by and outstrike Montel Jackson. I think he uses his jab. I think he uses his fakes and feints. I think he uses those body kicks and, strikes inside the clinch to kind of just outpoint Montel Jackson over 15 minutes. I don't like Jackson's trajectory when he throws his shots. I think he's a little bit sloppy with when he's actually throwing his punches. Like I said, I think the jab is solid in the 1-2, which, are some of the most important punches in MMA. But I think this is a fight that if Montel Jackson doesn't push Marcos up against the cage, if he doesn't take him down and hold him there and land ground and pound, I think Daniel Marcos wins this fight probably by a decision. I would say maybe a late TKO because I think Daniel Marcos could be there to land some good counters. But I think he just outpoints him and wins a 29-28 decision. Maybe Montel hurts him at a certain point, but I don't really see him hurting Daniel Marcos. And if he does, I think Marcos will recover and come back. Now, he does slow down later on in the fight, but I don't think Montel Jackson pushes an amazing pace later on in fights either. So I don't think that means as much as people may think it does. I'm going to take the underdog. I'm going to take Daniel Marcos. I think Marcos wins this fight on the scorecards, 29-28 unanimous decision. And you got to also take into account that when fights are really close, the judges do tend to lean towards the side of Marcos. I mean, he's undefeated in the UFC, but there's been some fights that have been close, and they tend to go in his direction. He knows what the judges are looking for, and he knows how to seal those rounds and land enough shots to where the judges think he's going to win. So when you give me him at a plus 160, plus 170, I got to take Daniel Marcos because I don't think this fight finishes, and I think if it does finish, I almost think it would be Marcos who lands the better shots later in the fight that might hurt Jackson, because I just don't see him knocking out Daniel Marcos with one shot, and I think he's technically better and has a better understanding and fight IQ of where he needs to be in order to, execute his game plan. So give me Daniel Marcos to win. I'm going to take him 29-28 unanimous decision. I think it goes the distance, and I think he wins on the scorecards. I like Daniel Marcos here. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for, and I think he's going to do enough to win this on the scorecard. So give me Daniel Marcos, 29-28 unanimous decision. All right, up next is in the welterweight division, the featured bout of the evening between Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez. These are both fighters that, in my opinion, are towards the tail end of their career. Ponzinibbio was getting pieced up by Carlston Harris, and then he landed that 3-2 and knocked him out and finished the fight in the third round. Against Alex Morono, he was getting dropped, he got hurt, he got rocked, and then he came back and he ended up knocking out Alex Morono in that fight. This is a fight where I think it's going to be primarily striking. I don't see any takedowns. I think it's going to be a kickboxing match. You've got the orthodox Ponzinibbio, who's got a good 1-2, a good 3-2, and a solid jab. And you have Daniel Rodriguez, who is also primarily a boxer, doesn't throw a lot of kicks, and is going to be looking to execute that check right hook, the overhand left, the 1-2 down the middle, and, throw his good punches. I would say, technically speaking, that, the eye test would tell you that Ponzinibbio is the better boxer. His 1-2, his 3-2, those are his best combinations, and when he lands them, they're very clean. But I don't like what I saw from him in his last fight against Carlston Harris. I mean, he was getting bombed away on, beat up by a much more unorthodox striker. And I mean, you look again, like we said, at the Alex Morono fight. Morono's not the cleanest striker. He's very unorthodox, very rigid, very awkward, and he was able to drop Ponzinibbio and hurt him early, and that was a fight on short notice. In this fight, I think Daniel Rodriguez also kind of at the tail end of his career, just based off recent performances, but to be honest, I kind of felt like he did enough to beat Kelvin Gastelum in their fight, and I thought the decision should have gone D-Rod's way. And at this point in their careers, I would say I think Kelvin Gastelum is a better fighter than a guy like Santiago Ponzinibbio. And I think Ponzinibbio has taken so much damage that if you land a good shot on him, you probably can put him away. And in this one in particular, I think D-Rod wins this fight. I think that, technically speaking, Ponzinibbio probably is the cleaner striker just based off combinations. But I think the awkward styles are what give Ponzinibbio trouble. And although D-Rod is a little bit awkward with that hands low, check hook, straight left, rear uppercut, check hook, jab, I mean, I think he's good enough to land with some big power, and also I think he can hurt a guy like Ponzinibbio, who's shown to be a vulnerability in terms of being dropped, being hurt, being rocked, being wobbled. He has good recovery, but I think D-Rod has a little bit more left in the tank at this point than Ponzinibbio does. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ponzinibbio squeaked out 2 rounds. Rodriguez hurt him, but it went to a decision, and maybe Ponzinibbio won a split decision. But I honestly am going to lean towards the D-Rod TKO here. I think he knocks him out in the 3rd round, maybe round 2 as well. I just think D-Rod has more left in the tank, and seeing how many times Ponzinibbio's been hurt, and I know people are going to say, well, he got knocked out with a head kick by Ian Gary, etc., etc. I mean, we saw what Ian Gary just did to Prates. Let's not talk about that because that made me very upset. I thought Prates was going to win, and he had the opportunity to do so in the 5th round when Gary was hanging on for a literal dear life. But that's besides the point. In this fight, I think it's going to be a close and competitive fight. And I think the power is on the side of Rodriguez, and I just think he's taken less damage in his career than Ponzinibbio at this point, and I think he's going to be able to last with shots that Ponzinibbio probably isn't going to be able to last if he gets cracked with. So give me D-Rod, give me Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez to win. I'm going to take him via a 3rd round TKO. Round 2, round 3, probably the most likely, but it could go to a decision. But give me Daniel Rodriguez, round 3 TKO over Santiago Ponzinibbio. I think he hurts him, drops him, and gets him out of there. All right, now we're at the co-main event of the evening in the middleweight division in a grappler's delight. Between the former double champion in one championship, currently undefeated in the UFC, at Reinier the Dutch Knight de Ridder, taking on the standout wrestler turned mixed martial artist, also undefeated in the UFC, coming off of a decision victory over Paul Craig in Bo Nickal. Yeah, so this one's tough because everybody and their mother is going to just ride on that Bo Nickal train. They're going to see that he's minus 300 now instead of a minus 1,000. Bo Nickal this, Bo Nickal that, Bo Nickal's going to win, Bo Nickal blah, 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 blah. I get it, listen, Bo Nickal is good, but he is not as good as all of you make him out to be, and I'm just going to call it like it is. When he fights a well-rounded mixed martial artist, he will not win. He's not going to be a champion in the UFC. He's not going to be a top-level middleweight contender. Does he have great wrestling? Yes, probably some of the best wrestling in the division. But Khamzat Chimaev would rip him apart. And I believe Reinier de Ridder to be one of the more difficult matchups for a guy like Bo Nickal. He's got amazing jiu-jitsu. He's very good positionally. And yes, is he going to get taken down by Bo Nickal? Probably. Is he going to get outstruck by Bo Nickal if it's on the feet? Yes, I believe Bo Nickal to be the much better striker. And when you have two grapplers going against each other, it more than likely is going to turn into a striking match between two high-level grapplers because nobody's going to want to initiate the initial takedown and potentially give up top position or get reversed in the process. And for the guy who's getting taken down or having the takedown initiated on him, he's not going to want to wind up off of his back because grappling is the most exhausting portion of the mixed martial arts game. But in this fight, man, I really think de Ridder is being slept on. His grappling is legit. He's very, very good positional awareness, very good at floating in the top position to different positions, very good at adjusting his weight when he's on your back to make sure he doesn't slide off. Decent ground and pound as well. And I do believe Nickal to be the better wrestler. If it cancels out the wrestling, I think Bo Nickal probably wins because I don't think de Ridder has much striking at all. But he uses his awkward striking to get into his wrestling, and I think Nickal is so cocky and so like hot-headed, so I'm the best, that he's going to want to prove that he can out-wrestle a grappler the level of a de Ridder. He's going to want to prove that he can take him down. He's going to want to prove that he can beat him on the ground. And I think he's going to get himself caught up in bad positions. And I would not be surprised if de Ridder submitted him. I'm going to tell you right now, I know Bo Nickal's competed in a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments. I know he's beat some very high-level guys. But I wouldn't be surprised if he left himself open for a submission from de Ridder. I wouldn't be surprised if he got out scrambled a few different times and just ended up losing positionally by decision to a guy like Reinier de Ridder. Like I said, I think Bo Nickal is much better on the feet. He has the better striking because I don't believe de Ridder has much striking at all. The striking is more of a means to an end in order to get into the range that he needs to in order to execute his takedowns. But this guy's legit. Part of me wants to say I think this fight goes the distance. I'm going to say I think it goes the distance. I think de Ridder could win by submission. I think he could find the neck of Bo Nickal if he's able to win positionally. And I think he could submit him late, probably round 2, round 3. I think Nickal, if he wins, it's probably a TKO where he'll hurt him on the feet and potentially ground and pound his way to a victory because I do believe he's going to be there to be hit. And if it's, man, I don't know. I just see de Ridder getting his hand raised at the end of the day. At plus 250, even if I didn't take the odds, I don't want people to say I'm just a Bo Nickal hater because I've picked RDR in both of his UFC fights. So I don't want to hear this, you're a Bo Nickal hater, you're this, you're that. Shut the hell up because you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, do I like Bo Nickal? I'm not a big fan, but I think de Ridder's a lot better than people give him credit for. All those people who were hooting and hollering that Kevin Holland was going to beat de Ridder and de Ridder ran through him and sliced through him like butter. Now this is a different stylistic matchup. But at the same time, Holland's more dangerous on the feet than a guy like Bo Nickal. So I think Bo Nickal is a little bit too, I want to say too cocky, but I feel like he kind of drinks his own Kool-Aid a little bit too much. And I think that de Ridder is very solid technically. He's very grounded in his positions. He's very aware of where his weight needs to be in terms of weight distribution and sinking off to one side, sinking off to the other. He's very good in the scrambles, very good at defending submissions. Honestly, what I think is going to happen is I think de Ridder is going to shoot. Nickal's going to throw up a sub. I think de Ridder's going to get out of it and control from that top position and just eventually start to wear out Bo Nickal until he gets a late submission or wins by decision. I'm going to go on a limb and say this goes the distance. I'm going to say Reinier de Ridder wins 29-28 unanimous decision over Bo Nickal, but I would not be surprised if he was able to slow him down, tire him out, and win with a rear naked choke or an arm triangle. So round 3 submission or Reinier de Ridder by decision, but the pick is the Dutch Knight to remain undefeated in the UFC and hand Bo Nickal his first mixed martial arts defeat. Give me Reinier de Ridder as the plus 250 underdog. 29-28 unanimous decision. All right, and now we're at the main event of the evening in the bantamweight division between Corey Sandhagen and Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm not going to take too long on this breakdown. I like Sandhagen. I think he is going to probably get put in some bad positions on the floor, but I also think the last few fights that he's had, he's been able to adjust his grappling defense, his get-up game, his submission defense, working up on the cage to get back up. And I don't think Deiveson Figueiredo is going to just take him down and run through him like he did to a Cody Garbrandt on the mat. I think for the most part, the grappling is going to be the heavy game plan for Deiveson Figueiredo. I think he has a lot of power, but we don't see Corey Sandhagen get hurt that often. But Deiveson did drop Petr Yan. So we know that the power is legit. He keeps his hands low. He leans forward, baits him in with the head movement, and comes through with big uppercuts, big overhands, switch stance, straight punches in order to rock his opponent. And he could clip the chin of Sandhagen. But Sandhagen's footwork, his movement, the in and out movement, the stance switches, the mixing up of the combinations, I think that's just way too much for a guy who's as meat and potatoes as Deiveson Figueiredo. Now, we did see him get taken down, got to get his back taken and get choked out by Aljamain Sterling in their first fight. I think if they fought again, that would not happen. I think Sandhagen has shored up a lot of his submission defense, a lot of his takedown defense, a lot of his ability to get back up off the floor whilst defending submissions and get back to where he needs to be in order to win the fight. And also, in the same token, I think he's kind of shored up his offensive grappling because we've seen him use takedowns and, get top position on opponents as well in order to bank rounds and win these decisions. He's probably become more of a win rounds than being an exciting fighter in his last few fights, which would probably lean a lot of people towards the deductive reasoning that he is going to probably win this fight by decision, and for the most part win it pretty comfortably, maybe get put in 1 or 2 bad positions, but win it on the scorecards. I don't agree. I actually think Sandhagen wins this fight by a TKO. The style of Davison, I think, plays right into the style of a Sandhagen with the footwork, with the stance changes. I think he will be there to be hit. I think he is more than capable of being hurt and being rocked. He got hurt at a certain point in the Petr Yan fight, but Yan just wasn't able to finish. But Davison did come back and rock Petr Yan, which shows you that his power from 125 to 135 does carry over. And in some photos I've seen recently, it looks like he is a lot bigger and you know, just a bigger, more hefty version of himself at this point in time in the 135-pound division, and a lot of people are going to think that's going to help him. I don't think it does, man. I think Umar is a much better grappler than Davison Figueiredo. I think even Petr Yan is a better grappler than Figueiredo in certain aspects. He just doesn't use it very often. And I think the defense of Corey Sandhagen has gotten a lot better. And like I already talked about, you know, getting up off the bottom, defending submissions, not giving up his back so easily. If he does give up his back, he's able to defend and roll out, using the cage to get up and fighting for the underhooks and getting back to the center. The footwork and the movement and the stance changes is also going to make it harder for Davison to track Sandhagen and set up those takedowns, because you have to have a clear path in order to get in on the hips of Sandhagen to get those takedowns. At the end of the day, man, I think Sandhagen is going to piece him up, outstrike him, out-volume him, you know, land some elbows, land some knees. I think there could be a doctor stoppage in this fight. Maybe he hurts, cuts over the eye with an elbow or a knee. I think he's going to be throwing a lot of head kicks, and I think he's going to be throwing a lot of knees and uppercuts up the middle, because he's going to expect Figueiredo to be, you know, shooting takedowns and level changing. And I also think that the jab is going to kind of set up everything that he throws. He's going to be expecting Figueiredo to either stance change to get to the outside of the jab and come over the top, or slip his head to the inside and come over the top with the jab, and then slip back and come back the other way with the check hook or the jab. Figueiredo very heavy on that lead leg with his hands low, kind of parrying the shots with the rear hand, slipping and rolling to the inside or outside, and either countering with the left hook or coming over the top when he slips inside of the jab. I think the style of Sandhagen is just too much, and it's going to give Davison too many questions that he can answer on the night. I think he's going to get kind of pieced up and eventually get hit with a big knee that drops Figueiredo and allows for Sandhagen to get the TKO. Give me Corey Sandhagen. Give me the Sandman to win 4th round TKO over Davison Figueiredo in this fight. Yeah, I'm going Sandhagen, and I think he finishes him. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Figueiredo, UFC Des Moines, Sandhagen versus Figueiredo preview, predictions, and breakdown. I'm your host, Double M. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and lock up your favorite submission on the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads from the premier pro wrestling and mixed martial arts channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Let's make some money this weekend at UFC Des Moines.